Mother Teresa, at the beginning of her life as a young nun, heard an audible voice from God telling her to go and serve Jesus among the poorest of the poor. And she did that in Calcutta. Well, what people didn't realize until after she died is that throughout the rest of her life, she kept seeking these experiences of God, and it seemed like God was absent. For years, her prayers felt dry. Her time of devotion to God felt empty, like she was praying and there was no one there. This is a common experience in Christian tradition. A person by the name of St. John of the Cross once referred to it as the dark night of the soul. And what he said is, the purpose of the dark night of the soul is to humble us. It's to chasten us, to get us away from focusing on our experiences of God, to actually love God Himself, who is unknowable, the ultimate mystery. That is the essence of loving God. If that's all we were left with in today's text, if all we were left with is the two commands that Jesus gave us, it would be hopeless for us indeed, wouldn't it? Because it's all about law. I have a hard enough time loving my neighbor, much less loving God. I wish the teacher, rather the lawyer in this subject, in this lesson, had asked Jesus this question. Jesus, which promise in the gospel is the greatest? You've shown us which command in the law is the greatest. Which promise in the gospel is the greatest? I think I know how Jesus would answer. How do you think Jesus would answer? What do you think the greatest promise is in the gospel? Maybe it's that God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. You see, Jesus is the ultimate gift from God. God's love is shown most clearly through the person of Jesus. It's through Jesus that we learn how to love. Jesus is the inspiration for us to love. How did He love? He reached out to all people, regardless of race or class or creed. He reached out to those that were considered unclean by the society of the day and touched them. He made Himself unclean so that they might be made clean. At the end of His life, on the night before His crucifixion, He knelt down and washed His disciples' feet as if He were a common slave to them. And of course, on the cross, He showed us the greatest example of love, giving up His life for our sakes. And then, when we had nailed Him to that cross, He cries out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is the essence of love. That's the inspiration that Jesus gives to us. But God does more than just inspire us to love. God empowers us to love. In the Bible, in various places, there are the fruits of the Spirit that are listed. What's the first fruit of the Spirit that's always listed? Love. Love is the first fruit of the Spirit. The Spirit gives that to us. The Spirit gives us the ability to love. Part of the way I think the Spirit does this is by helping us to realize that Christ has done everything we need to do for our salvation. We don't have to do anything. We are freed from this need to have to get ahead of others. This need of having to get ahead to get brownie points with God. We don't need to get brownie points with God. God has already done it all for us on the cross. And then, as we focus on God and give thanks for what God has done so generously to us, God opens us up to see the needs of our neighbor. To serve them not because of anything that we need to get, not because I'm better than you and I'm going to help you out. No, to see them because they are a fellow brother or sister for whom Christ died. And they need our help, plain and simple. It's about living that love in the everyday. That's what the Spirit empowers us to do. Two great examples of this that I know of. The first one is a monk from a couple hundred years ago by the name of Brother Lawrence, and a little tiny book called The Practice of the Presence of God. If you haven't read this book, I'd recommend it. You can read it in one sitting, 30 minutes, an hour at most. What Brother Lawrence found out in his own life, he was a cook in his monastery. That's all he was. Nothing more. He wasn't a priest, anything like that. He was the monastery's cook. He came to the realization that he could be as devoted to God and could be with God just as much when he was peeling potatoes as when he was kneeling before the altar. When he was, going out and gardening, as when he was reaching out to a traveler who had come their way. That he could be in the presence of God, that unknowable mystery, in everyday moments. Another good example of this is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I've talked about him quite a bit. Dietrich was a Lutheran pastor who spoke out against the Nazi atrocities in the 1930s and 40s and was killed by the Nazis in 1945. Many of his texts are very intellectually challenging to read. They're tough, the stuff he's wrestling with in the scriptures. But towards the end of his life, he came to a revelation. He wrote this while he was in prison, towards the very end. He writes, "I discovered later, and I'm still discovering right up to this moment, that it is only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith. By this worldliness, I mean living unreservedly in life's duties, problems, successes, and failures. In so doing, we throw ourselves completely into the arms of God, taking seriously not our own sufferings, but those of God in the world. That, I think, is faith. Giving ourselves over to God completely in this world, in the everyday moments. That's the essence of loving God and loving our neighbor. So this week, I'd like to invite you to take some time each morning in prayer. Just 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes. Rest in the arms of God. You can open up a Bible verse and look through it if you like, or just light a candle, or just sit out the window and look at the beauty of the morning. Let God love you in that everyday moment. Let God come and touch you. Put his arms around you and hold you. And then open yourself up to where God might show you the neighbor that needs your help in the everyday. That is loving God and loving our neighbor. What a joy it will be to be with God in the everyday. Thanks be to God.